did you leave in 1967?
Well, as I told you, the atmosphere was changing.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1976.
67.
67.
When I quit working for him.
Okay.
On the payroll, but that's not when I stopped being with him.
Okay, yeah, okay.
In 67, the atmosphere changed. Priscilla was trying to, unfortunately and stupidly trying to change Elvis. And it got to the point where all she wanted was her and Elvis and Joe and Joni. And, excuse me, and Jerry Schilling and his wife, because Jerry Schilling and his wife, Sandy, at the time, were attached to Joe and Joni.
Mm-hmm.
And they did Priscilla's bidding, where most of the rest of us wouldn't. And I got tired of it. Plus the fact I was away from my family too much, and I didn't need to do that, you know, if I had to put up with that. The others were getting a little tired of it too. Billy and Joe in particular, and they left shortly after I did. But Billy and Joe Smith, that is, not Joe Esposito. And at the same time, just coincidentally, there was a company here called Pepper Tanner that was a big bartering company. They basically, what they did is they used to make jingles for radio stations and advertising. And for the radio stations, they would trade the jingle for time on those radio stations. Then they'd turn around and take that time and sell it to advertisers. It's a pretty good deal they had. It turned out to be a big company. And one of the owners came to me, and who I had got to know, and asked if I would start a record company for him. He wanted to get in the record business because that's, you know, Memphis was really hot back then.
Mm-hmm.
And he made me a good offer, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I told Elvis, and we were in the dining room, and I said, you know, I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to leave, and I've got this offer, and I'm under. And his first remark to me was, well, what if I need you? I said, well, I'm not going anywhere. You know, I'm going to be here in town. You know how to get a hold of me. I said, plus, you know, I'll be coming up as much as I can. He said, well, you know, I would hope so. And I said, yeah. Well, it turned out that for the next 9 years, I was with him almost every night in Memphis when he was there, him and the guys. And he acted like I was still working for him. A lot of time, which he didn't particularly like, Joe would stay back in California where he had a house, an apartment, his wife, instead of staying in Memphis. And that didn't sit too well with Elvis. So Elvis started, I mean, you know, he just kept asking me to do things as I would have if I was still the foreman.
Mm-hmm.
Although Joe was the foreman at the time. And then, you know, he had asked me if I want to go on some of the tours and to Vegas. You know, I went to the opening in Vegas in '69 and was out in Vegas on almost every engagement for at least a week because I had a business to take care of back in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, I started the record company. First record I cut, I produced this local group. It was what we called a baby hit, and I had help from Isaac Hayes and David Porter in producing it, and they had written a song. Then I discovered Rita Coolidge and produced her first hit on it and got her known out on the West Coast, which led to her becoming a big recording artist. Shortly after that, because I had been doing some of the sessions at American, and I got to know Chips and the musicians and everything, and Chips got to know me real good, and he asked me to come over and run the studio for him, which I did in 1969, about 2 or 3 months after Elvis did the session. Because I got to know Chips and them, you know, I talked Elvis into recording there. I think we covered that last.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why I left. In '76, he just decided that he wanted to have more privacy, and he was really getting a little messed up, and I think he just didn't want some of us to see him that way, because we knew better than those young guys did. Because that's basically was with him, with the exception of Esposito and Billy and Lamar. The rest of them were these young guys, like a couple of the Stanley brothers, and Dean Nicopolis, and a couple of Dean's friends. And, you know, and of course Elvis didn't look upon them the way he looked upon us. You know, he told Billy that. He said, it's not the same. He said, and I don't trust these guys like I did the old guys. And he said, Billy said, he asked me, he said, Elvis asked Billy, he said, well, why is it that way? And Billy looked at him, he says, well, Elvis, you're the one that chased those guys away. You know.
Yeah.
But he didn't chase me away, basically. He had done these shows in Memphis, and about 4 or 5 days later, I called up the house to see what was going on, and Billy answered the phone, and he said, I'm glad that you called instead of just trying to come to the gate and not being let in. I said, what? He said, well, he said, Elvis just wants some privacy. He wants, you know, he just wants to spend time without a whole bunch of guys around. And, he said the only thing he's going to have, he said, you know, because Billy and his family were living out there anyway, and Billy was like a younger brother to Elvis. He was more like a younger brother than a cousin. And,
yeah, he would be interested to talk to.
And Elvis wanted him there. He was probably the closest person to Elvis in the last year or so of his life. And he said the only thing only people Elvis won't hear is the young guys working in shifts. He said he just wants one guy here at the house, and they can work in shifts in case he needs them to go do something for him. Other than that, he wants everybody to basically stay away. And the first thing I said to Billy, I said, well, good. I said, I wish he would have done that years ago. Because, see, he was the one that always wanted everybody there. And, like I said, even though I didn't work for him, you know, he wanted me there almost every day. And that's how all that happened. And that was shortly after he had fired. He had Vernon fire Sonny and Red and Dave.
Really? Huh. But Marty, why was
he was going to fire a few other people. He was going to fire Dick Grove.
Was he?
But Billy talked him out of it because he told Elvis he needed some security when he went on tour. And Elvis had told him before the last tour that never happened. The last tour, but Elvis died, so it didn't happen. He had asked Billy if he could handle the foreman's job, and he said because he was going to fire Joe after that tour. And Billy told him, he said, well, if that's what you want me to do, I can handle it. Ain't no problem, because Billy was basically acting as a foreman all those months because Joe was out in California.
Right. Marty, why was there a Memphis Mafia? Why did Elvis need all these guys? Why was there a Memphis Mafia? I mean, was it...
It's very simple.
Okay.
Because of the tact that was created in the early years by Parker of keeping Elvis away from the public. And because Elvis became such a phenomenon that Elvis couldn't go out in public. It was really worse in the early years out in public, and so that's what started him staying inside at the house. And you've got to have people to talk to.
Right.
You know? You can't sit there and look at four walls, or you know, talk to a maid, or a housekeeper, or one or two people for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So he picked and chose friends, and picked and chose people who were around him for a good while, that he learned from being around them that they could be trusted, number one, and number two, that he enjoyed being around and they enjoyed being around him.
Mm-hmm.
He missed on a couple of people, but for the most part, you know, most of the original guys were good for Elvis, and he was good for us.
Okay.
And like I said, we were all young in the beginning, so we all grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we were all kids in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he needed the Memphis Mafia, and I can tell you this, and some of the other guys will tell you the same thing. If he didn't have a group of guys around us, like us, didn't have to necessarily be the individuals who were there, but not have a group around to function the way we function, for him and with him, he probably would have died a lot earlier than 77.
Mm-hmm. Marty, did Elvis spend as much time in his bedroom as much as they let on?
In the bedroom?
In his bedroom, yeah. And they kind of make it sound like he spent the majority of his life in his bedroom.
Here's what it was, is during the movie years, of course, he went to bed earlier, although, except for the weekends. The weekends, we stayed up all night, slept during the day. During the week, when he was making movies, he had to get up at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock, to be at the studio in time to go do makeup, and so he worked all day. And then we came home, we sat around, had supper, sat around and talked. If he was tired, he'd go in his room. And, of course, a lot of times when he went in his room during the movie years, he rehearsed, you know, and read the lines for the next day. And maybe the rest of us, some of us would, you know, if we wanted to, go out to a club or something like that. In Memphis, when we got home from Hollywood, he'd stay in his room about 3 or 4 days just to unwind.
Mm-hmm.
But then we'd get into a routine of sleeping during the daytime and staying up all night again. We'd either go to the fairgrounds or go roller skate, or go to the movies, the Memphian, all night long. And the later years, the roller skating was gone and the fairgrounds were gone.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do either one of them. So we went to the movies a lot, or we'd sit around and talk.
Play pool?
Sometimes we play pool, but, you know, the fallacy that he just holed up in his bedroom, you know, that's...
Okay.
He just had different hours than other people.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to ask.
when he went on tour, it would be the same thing, because, you know, the shows were at night, so he'd sleep most of the day. And then when we'd come home, once again, he would stay up in his room, but, of course, he had a suite of rooms up there. It wasn't just one room. And he'd stay up there for about 4 or 5 days and unwind. Then he'd come down and start functioning again like we always do.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another fallacy.
Okay.
And people will say Elvis was a prisoner in his own home. Elvis Presley went out whenever he wanted to, wherever he wanted to. He just got to a point where a lot of times he didn't want to go. But if he wanted to go, as an example, there are times he wanted to go shopping. Well, we'd either call the store and ask them if they'd hold it open after they closed, and if they wouldn't do that, then he'd go up there with about 3 or 4 or 5 of us, and he'd go, he'd do shopping, and look around and buy stuff, and he never refused an autograph. We were just around to be sure that nobody did something stupid.
Uh-huh.
But if someone came up to him and said hello, and shook his hand, he'd shake their hand, he'd talk to them, they asked for an autograph, he'd give them an autograph.
Uh-huh.
If they wanted to take a picture with him, he'd take a picture with them.
Did you ever find a lot of people that would come up to him because they'd hear, Elvis gave a car to a black woman on the corner of the street? Did you ever see people trying to get something from Elvis?
Well,
I like that ring, Elvis. Oh, I always wanted one. I mean, did you see that shit happen, or?
The problem is that people who, and I hate to say this, there was a couple of guys who used to do that when Elvis would buy something, like a ring or something. Man, Elvis, that's really pretty. Because they were hoping that he'd take it off their finger and give it to them.
And it wasn't people on the street.
Once or twice he did that. But I have to believe that he knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the interesting part about people asking him for things is if, because I did this for 2 weeks at the end of 62, Billy and I came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Elvis wanted to stay in Vegas, and Billy and I wanted to come back with our families. So for 2 weeks until he got back in January and February, I worked out in the office. I didn't work, I just sat out there. And I used to read the fan mail. And I tell you what, some of those letters were unbelievable. Vernon in particular liked to keep some of the pictures that the girls sent him.
Oh, really?
A lot of them didn't have any clothes on.
Oh, goodness.
But I used to read these letters. There was this one guy who used to write every week. And evidently there was something wrong with him. He said, "Dear Cousin Elvis," I remember it almost word for word. "I went by the furniture store today and I told him what you told me about picking out furniture for bedrooms and that to send you the bill. And the guy started to give me a problem. He wouldn't let me do that. He said, but I really do appreciate you saying that you'd buy that furniture for me, and I got it all picked out, and all I need for you to do is either call that furniture company or send me a check for $2,000 so I can get that furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Your cousin Tony."
And this guy used to write every week?
Yeah, Elvis didn't have a cousin Tony.
Hey, Marty, when did you hear that Elvis had passed away?
Well, in May, I believe it was March or May of 77, I decided to get away from Memphis. I had already cleaned up off the pills that I had been taking. I wasn't taking that anymore. I just wanted to clear my head and clear the air. So my family and I moved out to Irvine, California, which is just below Los Angeles. And I was working in food sales. And I had just left the office. And when I turned my car on, the radio automatically came on, and all I heard was, "Lee is dead." And then it went right into an Elvis song. And I said, "No, that's just a coincidence." And I said, we about. It probably ain't got nothing to do with him, but I was wanting the record to hurry up and be over. And when the record was over, the guy said, "Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned to you, the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, has died today."
August 16th.
At 1 p.m. or whatever it was. And in a way, I wasn't surprised, but in a way, it must have numbed me for a moment, because my car started heading for this damn light pole on the corner, because I wasn't paying attention. Unfortunately, I snapped out of it and grabbed the wheel in time to just pull it back on the road. And the guy kept on talking and then playing some more records. And I zoomed on home. And by the time I lived in this beautiful new planned community, and by the time I turned my corner, my wife and my oldest daughter were out in front of the garage waiting, because they knew I was coming home. And they were crying and upset and asking me if it was true. And I said, "Well, I don't know. Let me park the car and go inside and call." And I called the house. Graceland and Larry answered the phone. And I said, "Larry, well, what is all this?" And he said, "Marty, it's true. He's gone." And I said, "Who's there?" He said, "Well, Lamar's right here." I said, "Let me talk to Lamar." I didn't want to talk to Larry. I was in no mood to hear philosophical bullshit. And Lamar got on the phone. He said, "Marty," he said, he's gone. He finally has done it. Meaning, the pills or whatever. And of course, I started to choke up. And Lamar just said to me, he said, "Look, you need to stop that." He said, "We got enough of that here." And I said, "Well, I loved him." And he said, "Well, we all do." And that was it. That's how I found out.
Did you go to the funeral?
I was supposed to go. There was a ticket waiting for me at the airport, but my wife, because of what had happened, because she also wasn't feeling good, had a nervous breakdown. And 1 minute she'd say, "Go on and go, because I know you need to go." And I had spoken to Joe and Billy the day after. They knew. I told them I was coming, and they had a plane ticket waiting for me at the airport. And every time I'd go to the door, she'd start screaming, saying, "No, please don't leave." And then 10 minutes later, she'd say, "I know you need to go." That's what happens when people have a breakdown or what have you.
Right.
And so I had to make a decision, and I'm not proud of this, but for the first time in 20 years, I chose her, my wife and my family over others. And what I mean by I'm not proud of it is that I should have chosen them.
Right, I understand.
A lot longer before. But basically, that was the same with all the guys. We gave up a bunch of our family lives. It was us doing it, not him. To be around him because we cared that much.
Right.
And but I didn't go, and in a way, I have said this for 30 years. In a way, I'm glad I didn't, because I didn't want to see him laying in that casket. I would rather remember him the way I remember him, with a big smile on his face, because Elvis had a smile that could light up a room. And that's really the way I remember him.
Yeah. There's something else I wanted to ask you. Do you, right after Elvis had passed away, of course, Ginger Alden was saying that here's his, it was all over the news, that his fiancée. Do you know if Elvis ever asked her to marry him?
From what Billy and Lamar told me, that he had suggested it and asked in a way, but he had absolutely no intention of marrying her. As Elvis told Billy, he said, I said we'd get married, but I never said when.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was nothing but I never met Ginger. I'm going by what the guys tell me and what other people have told me, Joe Smith. And for my own summation, she was nothing but a trophy for Elvis. And the fact of the matter is that Elvis was getting older. He had gotten sick. He had gotten big. He bloated up. And she was a trophy for him. He wanted, for his own mind, but he also wanted the guys and other people to see I can still get a good-looking young girl. And that's all that was.
Mm-hmm.
They had nothing in common. Ginger wanted to do all the things that Elvis and we had done years and years before that we had no interest in doing before. I heard all she wanted to do was take Elvis to these clubs where her friends hang out so she could show him off. I also have heard, too, that what her mother and the rest of the family wanted was to get stuff from Elvis. And because of his generosity, they did get some things, but that's what they were there for.
Mm-hmm.
But she was nothing but a trophy fan.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going to marry her.
How about Dee Presley?
Who?
Dee Presley? Vernon's second?
I'd rather refer to her as Dee Stanley.
Okay. Oh, she's got another book. She's got another book out.
Yeah, I saw that on the website today, and I don't know if Lee will allow this kind of language on the radio show, but she's nothing but a piece of shit.
Okay, I don't think he'll mind. I don't think he'll mind.
She is nothing but a liar. She's a hustler. This bogus Billy Miller.
Yeah.
She and her lovely phony preacher son Ricky tried to get some of us to vouch for Billy Miller, and he's nothing but a scam artist. They were behind Dee, and her boyfriend or husband or whatever he is Tucker, and Ricky were behind Miller, and they were part of the scam.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, anybody who invests in a movie based on what Dee Stanley tells them, I got some swampland in Florida I'd like to unload on.
Well, Marty, I want to thank you very much for doing this for me and for Elvis Express Radio.
Well, you're quite welcome, and I appreciate the work that you and Lee do in helping to keep Elvis's memory alive. The website is really good. I enjoy, reading it. I read it almost every day, and some of those fans have some interesting comments on
Yes, they do.
some of those stories.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of them, but that's to be expected.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe.